You're listening to the Courageous Pivot podcast. This is a space where transformation begins and possibilities unfold from the heart. Whether you're standing at a crossroads or seeking clarity on when to trust your deepest instincts and take that life-changing leap, you're in exactly the right place. Get ready to unlock the courage, wisdom, and passion to turn challenge into opportunity. Your journey starts now. We are back, dear friends, and I'm so glad we are. This is the Courageous Pivot podcast, the podcast that celebrates bold, brave, sometimes messy, and ultimately beautiful journeys of transformation. I'm your host, Meghan Telpner, and I am genuinely grateful that you're here with me today. Now, this episode and next week's episode are a sweet little combination package. At first, I wrote them as a single one, but it felt like too much, too long. And really, I want you to be able to take in what I'm sharing and do the exercises, optimally pen to paper, pencil to paper, marker to sketchbook, however it may look, but that you are actually doing the work to explore this, to take action in your life. If you've been following along from the beginning, you know we've been exploring the various stages of pivoting, from recognizing those first whispers calling for change, to tuning into your heart's wisdom, to sitting in that ridiculously uncomfortable but necessary space of the unknown, really for as long as you need to be there. In sharing these explorations, I have begun receiving really, really beautiful and inspiring stories from you, the listeners, so thank you. I want to share a couple summaries, tidbits that have come through the inbox. One listener shared that she too, and I'm sharing these anonymously because they came by email. If they were public, I'd say your name. But one listener shared that she too had reached a major pivot point after being let go from her job, marking the first time she hadn't worked since the age of 16. In her 50s, instead of chasing roles that paid $20 an hour or less and feeling overqualified and out of alignment, she chose to take a bold leap. For years, she had considered pursuing a master's in clinical psychology to enhance the work she was already doing. So she decided to stop trying to squeeze back into something that no longer fit and instead follow what felt true. Now, she's just 2 weeks away from starting grad school in her 50s, and she's trusting that this life pivot is exactly where she's meant to be. As she said, and I quote, "Sometimes you really do have to put on your big girl pants and take that leap of faith, not always knowing the outcome, but choosing to move forward anyway." Another listener wrote to me and said, "Listening to your podcast is giving me the courage to embrace my true calling. I'm so excited to finally move to where my joy is, and I'm no longer deeply passionate about what I've been doing." The last one I want to share today came from Blair on Substack, who posted a comment on a recent post I wrote on, it was called The Beautiful Humility of Beginning Again. And if you subscribe to my Substack, you'll get the in-between writings as well. She shared how after 26 years of teaching high school math, she listened courageously to her heart and has started over as a home organizer and stylist, reminding herself, "I have to remember that I'm new again and that's okay." And that is a really powerful mantra to keep in your heart as you do start anything new, whether it's taking on a new hobby, a new career, a new business, a new relationship. You're starting where you're at and you build gradually and beautifully. These are just 3 examples of the stories that have been shared with me. But if you've heard the whisper, you've felt the nudge, and yet a complete pivot just isn't possible right now, this is the topic that we need to explore within the context of real life. Not everyone has the ability or even desire to knock it all down and start from scratch. So thankfully, that's not always necessary. Maybe you have young children who depend on your stability. Maybe you're supporting aging parents. Maybe you have financial commitments that can't be walked away from yet. Maybe the timing just doesn't feel aligned for that big leap. Whatever the reason, there are seasons in our lives when we know something needs to shift, but the grand, dramatic pivot simply isn't on the table yet. But here's what I've learned, and what I want to share with you today. Courageous pivots don't always have to be grand, dramatic gestures. Sometimes the most powerful changes start small, like micro small. And today we're talking about micro pivots, those intentional heart-led life or mindset shifts you can make right now, exactly where you are, with exactly what you have. Because the truth is, every big transformation is made up of hundreds of small choices. And those small choices, well, they might just be available to you today. What if, by the end of this brief investment of time that you're making to listen to this right now, today, you have a loose and doable plan that can ease you into feeling lighter and brighter, like within hours of this moment? That is the power in micro pivots. So, let's dive in. What is a micro pivot? Well, a micro pivot is a small strategic shift that moves you incrementally toward greater alignment without blowing up your whole life. That's the key here. It's not about quitting your job tomorrow or moving across the country or leaving your partner or becoming strictly carnivore. It's about making conscious choices that honor who you're becoming, even while you're still living in the structures of who you were and who you may still need to be for a little while longer. If you want to start lifting heavy weights, you don't start at your maximum. You start where you're at and push yourself gradually. You're building up your strength, your resilience, and your trust in what you can handle. That is how micro pivots work. Think of it like this. If a full pivot is turning the ship around completely, but not actually completely because then you'd be heading back the direction you came, but turning it around as the saying goes, a micro pivot is adjusting the rudder by just a few degrees, which means the direction will change slowly, but over time you will end up in a completely different place if you hadn't made that small adjustment. Micro pivots are for when you know something needs to shift, but you can't or aren't ready to make that dramatic change. They're for when you need to test the waters before diving in. Micro pivots help you move toward alignment without creating massive chaos in your life. It's try before you buy, if you will. And here's the beautiful thing about micro pivots. They build momentum. Each small shift creates a little more space, a little more clarity, and most of all, a little more confidence. They help you practice listening to your heart in low-stakes situations so that when the bigger decisions come, and they will, you'll trust yourself to make them. Before we get into the how, I want to talk about the why. Why should we make micro pivots at all? Well, they often emerge from a very specific feeling. You know you want something different, but change feels impossible because, well, life. We're humans and we have day-to-day life to live. Maybe you're in a job that drains you, but you have bills to pay and benefits to maintain. Maybe you're in a relationship that's not awful, but it's not nourishing either. It's not making either of you better people. It's not helping you to grow, and it's not in alignment with the future or even present you see for yourself, but the thought of upheaval feels overwhelming. Maybe you want to live somewhere else, eat differently, spend your time differently, but everything feels so interconnected that you don't know where to start. Or maybe, and this is a big one, you're afraid that if you start making changes, you'll have to make all the changes. That if you admit one thing isn't working, the whole house of cards will come tumbling down. I get it. I've been there too. Let's go way back in the journey. Back in 2004, 2005, around that time, I was working in advertising in my 20s. Whoa, that was 20 years ago. Okay, so I was working in advertising in my 20s and I knew that it wasn't right for me. I'd wake up with this low-grade dread, like a anxiety, nausea, knot in my stomach about going to work. I'd sit in meetings about campaigns for products I didn't believe in, hustle to win new business I didn't actually want to work on, and I was working with people who I really genuinely loved, but I couldn't understand how they were thriving on the very things that drained me. They were excited about it all. I wanted no part of it. I was just there for the social experience. But I also had rent in downtown Toronto, a lifestyle I'd begun building around that income, and absolutely no idea what the alternative looked like. I didn't know what else I could do, what I was qualified for, what I would love. I couldn't imagine the options. There was no future I could envision that wasn't in line with the path I was already on. So the idea of just walking away felt terrifying and irresponsible, especially because I was doing what I thought I was supposed to be doing. I was also dealing with a health crisis that, looking back, was a sure sign that I wasn't doing what I was supposed to be doing. But the benefit, the silver lining of that, is that it had me deep into learning about food and nutrition. I began reading books about nutrition during my lunch breaks. I started exploring that room in my apartment called the kitchen. I I started cooking. I started creating meals from scratch and meal plans for colleagues, and I found it all so fun. None of these things changed my job situation immediately, but they changed something in me. They gave me a little taste of what alignment felt like. And eventually, not immediately, but eventually, those micro pivots created enough clarity and momentum that I could see a path to the bigger change. Ultimately, when I chose to go back to school to study nutrition, I saw it as a year off from working to explore a topic that I needed to dive deeper into to help resolve my own health issue. I looked at it as a sabbatical of sorts at the age of 26. But when I told my office roomie, Paula, we'd shared a windowless office in the first ad agency we both worked for, when I told her about this decision, her response was so perfect. She said, "Yes. Why didn't we think of this sooner?" As a little side note, Paula is still a dear friend of mine, and she was who was at the top of my list to take over as CEO of my company. I wanted her so badly. And in the end, it was a gift that she declined many, many, many times, because I asked many, many, many times, because it did help me get set on the right path. As you well know, things do drop in just when they need to. The thing is, and what I experienced once you start to make the small pivots, trying new things on for size, you really do gain confidence in the process. I'm quite sure that it took 1, maybe 2 days of nutrition school for me to know there was no way I was going back to corporate advertising. And I still didn't know where I was headed, but once you get a taste of this alignment, the transformation has begun. As I've said before, once those lights have been turned on, they cannot be turned back off. I mean, you can turn them off, but it will ultimately result in your greatest source of suffering. Though the path isn't always easy, there is a rightness in it that only fuels your confidence in the process. To help organize this for you, I want to touch on the 4 main spheres of micro pivots. We have lifestyle, mindset, relationships, and work. And the beautiful thing is, you can start with whichever one feels most accessible to you right now. But ultimately, all will get touched in the process. You cannot heal any single thing in isolation. I've said this 12, 1,000, 100 million times in my work in culinary nutrition. You can't heal one thing in the body in isolation. The whole body heals. Once the body heals, the spirit starts to heal. The same goes for every aspect in your life. It is all connected. You cannot get healthy and aligned in one area without it touching all the others. So let's start with the lifestyle micro pivots. These are changes to how you spend your daily life, your routines, your environment, your self-care practices. It might be waking up 15 minutes earlier to have quiet time before the day starts. It might be taking a different route to work that's more scenic. It might be replacing your mindless scrolling time with reading, journaling, or walking while listening to the Courageous Pivot podcast, perhaps. It might be rearranging your living space to have it feel more spacious, refreshed, aligned with what you enjoy and how you live today. It might be saying no to one commitment that drains you, or adding one small practice that nourishes you. Maybe it's making your bed every morning. Do that. It's like a key habit of successful people. Or listening to music while you cook, or taking 3 deep breaths before you check your email. Now, these might seem insignificant, but they're not. They're acts of self-respect. They're ways of saying my experience matters. How I feel in my daily life matters. And when you start to raise that bar for yourself, you also inherently raise the bar in how other things in your life are allowed to behave. It ultimately raises your total standard, your set point. And then there's the mindset micro pivots. These are shifts in how you think about yourself, your situation, and what's possible. These ones are fun experiments to do because they don't actually require necessarily a change in habit, just some pattern interrupt in your own thinking. So you might start by just questioning one limiting belief you've held about yourself. It might be starting to see your current job as a stepping stone rather than a trap that you're stuck in. It might be reframing things like I have to as I choose to in areas where you do have actual agency and you do have more than you may think. It might be practicing gratitude for what's working while also honoring and paying attention to what's not. It might be that you're beginning to imagine what you'd want if anything were possible. Not to plan, but just to start to dream. Or it might be catching yourself when you dismiss your own desires as unrealistic and instead ask, but what if they're not? What actually is possible? And with that, you'll be letting go of all the little voices in your head of what everyone else will think, and we will get there. The mind is incredibly powerful. When you start to shift how you think about your situation, you begin to see options you couldn't see before. Remember, that unknown place, even if it's in your own mind, is where that infinite potential lies. The third is the relationship micro pivots. These are the small changes in how you show up in your relationships with family, friends, your partner, colleagues, but most of all with yourself. And this could look like having one honest conversation with yourself or with someone else about how you're feeling, about any aspect of your life. It's about getting in touch with that truth. It might be setting a small boundary where you've been saying yes to everything too often. It might be asking for support in one specific area where you actually do need some help and someone is there and can help you. It could be spending more time with people who energize you and less with those who drain you. I'm very good at this boundary. It might be speaking up once in a meeting instead of staying silent all the time. It could be saying, I need to think about that instead of immediately agreeing to requests. Try that one. Do you want to come out for dinner? Can you take on this project? Can you watch my kids? I need to think about that. Let me get back to you. Our relationships shape us more than we realize. When you start showing up differently, more authentically, more boundaried, more honest, it changes everything. And finally, the work or career micro pivots. These are the small shifts within your current work situation that move you toward greater fulfillment. It could be volunteering for a project that excites you. Do not underestimate the power in shifting how you feel and your mindset by having something that you're excited about, whether it's something in the future to look forward to or something you're currently working on that really sparks that creativity in you. Having a conversation with your manager about what parts of your job energize you most. Maybe it's taking an online course in something you're interested in. We had a lot of women in their late 40s, early 50s join the Culinary Nutrition Expert program because their children had left the home and they suddenly had more time to start pursuing what fulfilled them. And this experience for them was dramatically life-changing. Connecting with someone in a field that interests you just to learn, not necessarily to job hunt. It might be delegating or automating one task that drains you. There is so much room for automation and efficiency these days. Take the time to explore it. It would save you hours and hours over time. Setting better boundaries around work emails or meetings, or using your lunch break to do something that feeds your soul instead of scrolling social media. It could even just be sitting down to have a conversation with someone you work with. You don't have to quit your job to start honoring your work-related needs and desires. What's powerful here is when you shift one thing, you make one micro pivot, there is a ripple effect. Here's what I've observed in my own life and in the lives of people I've spoken to about this at length. And I have been speaking to a lot of people about this at length, both for the podcast and in my own life. Micro pivots create these ripple effects. When you start making small changes that honor who you're becoming, it shifts your energy. You feel a little more alive, a little more like yourself. People notice. Opportunities start to show up. Clarity begins to emerge. When you start taking small steps towards alignment, life starts to meet you there. I like to think of it as winks from the universe, small coincidences or moments of serendipity that just feel a little bit like magic. When you start paying attention, you start to notice it everywhere. And ultimately, the micro pivots can lead to macro change. Sometimes the micro pivots are enough. Sometimes those small adjustments are exactly what you need to feel aligned and fulfilled with your current structure. There's no right way or no goal to getting there. It's always about how you feel, what's in your heart, and just being in alignment with who you are today. But sometimes, and often, and I don't want to scare you, but often they're preparation for something bigger. And I don't want you to cut yourself off from the full potential that is you because you did a few micro pivots. They were fun and fine. You just go on your merry way. What if they are the stepping stone? Micro pivots ultimately build your capacity to trust yourself. They show you what alignment feels like in small doses. They help you practice living from your heart instead of just your head. You get to try on being in full alignment without burning your life down. This means that when the bigger opportunities or callings arise, or the timing feels more right, you are ready. You've been practicing. You know what your yes feels like and what your no feels like. in your heart and in your body and will not let your mind talk you out of it. You've been strengthening that muscle of listening to yourself. You know how it feels and you know what it sounds like. For me, those years of micro pivots prior to finding my calling in health and nutrition gave me the confidence to eventually make the leap to start my own business in a field I was brand new in. And the micro pivots I made while building my business, the small adjustments, the gradual shifts, they are what enabled me to scale it to the company it became. They also helped me prepare for the eventual bigger pivot of scaling down. Each small choice is practice for the bigger choices to come. Now, before we close, I want to offer a simple practice to help you identify and implement a micro pivot in your own life. Find a quiet moment and place a hand on your heart. Just take 3 deep breaths, allowing your nervous system to settle. Then ask yourself this question. If I could make one small shift in my daily life that would bring me a bit more alignment, what would that be? Notice what arises. Don't judge or analyze it immediately. Just listen. And when you have a sense of a potential micro pivot, ask these 4 questions. I recommend you write them down. Number 1, is this truly within my control right now? What would success look like for this small experiment? What time frame feels appropriate to test it? And how will I know if it's creating more alignment? I'm going to include these in the show notes, which you can find on my Substack. I want you to really do this exercise. Give yourself 10 minutes, even set a timer if that's what you need so that you know when you're complete. And then once you've done it, I want you to commit to one micro pivot for your chosen time frame. Observe what happens with curiosity rather than judgment. At the end of your experiment, take time to reflect. What did you learn? What surprised you? What might be your next micro pivot based on this experience? Remember, there's no perfect micro pivot. There's only the next small step that feels aligned for you in this moment with your current circumstances. As we come to the end of today's episode, I want to leave you with this. The journey of transformation isn't always about grand gestures or dramatic exits. Sometimes it's about the quiet courage of making one small aligned choice and then another and then another. It's about honoring both your heart's knowing and your current reality. It's about recognizing that change doesn't have to be all or nothing to be meaningful. And most of all, it's about trusting that even the smallest shifts, when made with intention and heart, can eventually alter the course of your life in profoundly beautiful, empowering, and most likely surprising ways. If you're in a season where the big leap isn't possible yet, for whatever reason, know that you're not stuck. You're not failing. You're not ignoring the whisper. You're not selling yourself or anyone else short. You're simply honoring the timing of your unique journey and creating alignment in the ways that are available to you right now. And there is profound courage in that, assuming you're doing it honestly and not trying to take a shortcut or avoid the big work that needs to happen. If you feel called to, I'd love for you to share your micro pivot of choice in the comments section on this episode on Substack. Just search my name and you'll find it. Now, in our next episode, we're going to dive deeper into something I touched on today, why even these small changes can sometimes feel impossibly difficult to implement. We're going to explore the fascinating concept of immunity to change and how understanding your own resistance can actually become your greatest ally in making sustainable shifts. I want to thank you for being here with me today. If this episode resonated, I'd be grateful if you shared it with someone who might need this message, perhaps someone who feels the pull toward change but is constrained by circumstances beyond their control. For full show notes, resources, and special offers for listeners, you can visit courageouspivot.com. Best of all is to subscribe on Substack, where you'll find all the goods and receive an email when a new episode or in-between writing drops. And remember, your journey doesn't have to look like anyone else's. The most courageous path is the one that honors both your heart's wisdom and your current reality, micro pivots included. Until next time, keep listening to those whispers, trust the timing of your journey, and know that even the smallest aligned choices matter more than you can imagine. We'll see you next week on The Courageous Pivot.